Khensur Sempa Namdopa Mebe Chir Sherake Baro Do Jampa Tenji Mede Semla Tripa Meba Mede Chinjulo Mebe Shine Nyange Debe Da Jindo Dusum Do Namba Shu Sange Damji Gyam Sherake Baro Do Jampa Lana Meba Yanta So De Dawe Na Sherake Baro Do Jampa Repa Shema Lana Medama, Minamba Nyambema, Lunga Tamjera, Shiva Jebema, Mindena, Neba Shevanja, Cheraki Paro to Jebema, Neba Teata, Kate Para, Sam, Kate Bunso, Sheribu, Janju Sempa, Tempo, Teta, Cheraki Paro to Shiva, Samola, Lapa, Chao, Dene, Tamrin, the Dedition, Janju Sempa, Jambo, Baba, Jerry, Portula, Lexo, Shida, Watching, Lexo, Figgy, Buddhism, Chita, Figgy, Demba, Dishin, Sheraki, Paro, Chimpe, Namjan, Jesu, Hiram, Chamde, Tiki, Cards, and the Sevan, Demba, Shara, Tibu, Janju, Semba, Baba, Jerry, Poncho, Tantra, Limbe, Koro, Neta, Father, Milan, Hamai, Tisa, Chepe, Tisa, Chonde, Sumba, Baba, Bozo, Bozo, Wonder,
Okay, says a question to change. And then number 20 can be Shiba. And then Chubu Chen, Chubu, Ishichu, move each other, and move each other. Cheta Gorin, the Gorin, the Chevamaris, and I love on the Chen, Gorin, the Tambo Standing. Choosing each other, choosing on the penny to do so bad do the Golang give the giver each Jenny that each should share this should be shared.
So today, this morning, we will take up the second topic, which is the Dharma Ratna. And in the opening verses, some opening verses, they refer to a kind of relationship between or among the seven topics, that the Dharma arises from the Buddha. So the way to understand this is not in the sense that one attains Buddhahood in one's own mind, and following that in some temporal sequence, one then attains the Dharma Ratna. That at the time that Buddhahood is actually attained, then one, the nature of Buddhahood is such that the Dharmakaya itself contains the consummate form of the Dharma Ratna. So the attainment of Buddhahood and attainment of Dharma Ratna occur simultaneously for the individual who becomes enlightened. The sense that is meant by the treatise that there is some sequence to these topics is in a the temporal sense is in the way in which the Dharma becomes promulgated, which is to say that the Buddha, as in the historical Buddha, achieved enlightenment, and subsequent to his attainment of enlightenment, then he saw fit to convey the holy Dharma to his followers. And so in that sense, the Dharma followed the attainment of Buddha. But that is in sort of more provisional sense.
Now, that in 이징부터 저기 시대 세상에 모든 시야들이
그래서 이 ship 이 대마시 쉐야기 좀 봐.
다디 이거다 모든 일시 내 남대 시야가
그래.
근데
디 뭐부터 그림 봐 말했어. 뭐부터 그림 봐.
뭐부터 이징부터 그림 봐. 깨르는 거 맞아요 말이스.
그죠? 그래.
이징 담부 등해시 등해시 좀 분도 줘버렸더니 그저 관계를 놓지 그랬어. 문jul로도 그렇게 되는 뭐방문도 장이지. 이 제수 뭐방문도 제벌을 가르고 두선에 라무 공부도 쓰는데 이징부터 그린 거 언제 유진 문부터
유치에서 놀러 와.
네.
오케이. ini ngotot ko rin ba mares siya.
Yijing betikya rin ba mares.
Okay. Tene di shung dina di ngayon ko is.
Potential ba?
Right.
Potential tene lamde siya ba? Di siya di tanji denshi siya ko rin titan.
Okay. So the two main elements of the Dharma Ratna are the truth of cessation and the truth of the path. And the truth of cessation is presented first here in this text, following that, the truth of the path. However, this does not represent the order in which those two aspects of the Dharma Ratna arise in the practitioner's mind. They represent the order in which one understands the necessity of attaining first the truth of cessation as a means of abandoning the truth of origination, which is understood to be the cause of the suffering that needs to be realized. So the order of teaching the Four Noble Truths represents the understanding of the function of the Four Truths. So first, truth of suffering, once it's understood, then the question arises, can it be, or what is its cause? And once its cause is understood, then the question arises, can cause and the result then both be eliminated? And therefore, one needs to understand the nature and the possibility of achieving the truth of cessation. And once that is established, then the question arises, well, how does one go about attaining that cessation? And so finally, the truth of the path is taught as that which needs to be cultivated or meditated on. However, so that there is a reason for the order being presented in that manner, but that does not represent the way in which the truth of the path and truth of cessation in particular are attained. So in terms of practice, one has to cultivate the path, and by gaining the knowledge that arises with that practice, then the goal of achieving the cessation that brings about the abandonment of the obstacles will take place.
Samingimi tomes samdu nevaseti togilu mushikandu samdu nevasi. Samingimi setirva. Tadinala dote chari kanshi nemi yemi mayin yemi shen le shen to tabani tati samdu nevaseti. Samdu nevaseti na hinandari chati. There samdu nevaseti togilu shena toba desi. Togilu seti tobagi Mushi Kanduya something nevas. Mushi said, Shindi, Yogaya, Nevaya, Shindi, Nes, Yogaya, Shindi, Yumiga, Shindi, Nes, Yumiga, Mayinga, Shindi, Nes, that I Shindi never. The Togi Mushi Kanduya, something never said it. Some may say it.
So, in relation to the truth of cessation, it also has several aspects. The first of which is its innate purity. Its innate purity being that the truth of cessation itself is not self-existent. And so, in the opening verses, verse 9, and it gives a poetic presentation of these characteristics. And then verse 10 gives the terminology that relates to those characteristics. So verse 9 begins by saying that one cannot engage in any conjecture about the truth of the Dharma as regards its existence, its non-existence, both existent and non-existent at the same time, or being neither existent nor non-existent. Those four alternatives, one cannot conjecture about the nature of the Dharma-ratna in any of those four modes. So the verb conjecture should be understood to mean dualistic thought or conceptual thought. And so when it says that one cannot conjecture whether the Dharma exists, it means we have to understand the qualifier in a self-existent manner. So we can't conjecture whether the Dharma exists as in a self-existent way, or that its non-existence is a self-existent form of non-existence, and same with the other two alternatives. And in verse 10, this quality is described as the translation is given here, it's unthinkable, or the inconceivability of Dharma, the inability to form conceptual thoughts about the nature of the Dharma.
That is, the same then, Yana the Jebe Shibe said, Yana the Jebe Shiba said, Togre, Togre said, Jibre, Yana the Jebe Lud. Tashi Kandu something. Tashi did Yevaya temperament. Yevaya temperament, Yevaya temperament, Yumiga temperament. Yumiga Maipaya temperament never kiss. Togi look at the
So again, on the same first point, Samdumeva in Tibetan or Achintya means one cannot conceive of it. It's inconceivable. Its true nature. And the inconceivability, again, is referring to the innate purity of the Dharma-ratna, which is that it is not self-existent. That nature of emptiness that qualifies the Dharma-ratna cannot be as it is, as that nature is, cannot be conceived of with dualistic mind. Dualistic mind means the mind which perceives things in a subject-object manner. So any kind of dualistic thought, so a conceptual mind in the sense of this system, a conceptual thought is a dualistic mind. A dualistic mind, by its very nature, perceives things erroneously. So that kind of awareness does not have the capacity to perceive that innate purity of the Dharma-ratna as it truly is. And so in that sense, it's inconceivable to conceptual thought. So it's important to understand that this inconceivability means comprehended by dualistic thought. It's not to say that there's no awareness that can perceive the ultimate nature of the Dharma-ratna as it truly is. In fact, the Tibetan phrase "pakpe nyamsha yeshe," pakpa means Arya. Nyamsha yeshe means then his or her state of one-pointed transcendent awareness that perceives emptiness directly. So that mind, that awareness, is totally capable of appreciating the true nature of the Dharma. It's innate purity. However, any dualistic mind ability. So we can make another distinction about this point, which is also informative. That is to say, in the beginning, we recite the verse that's not from the Heart Sutra, but is praising the Prajnaparamita, saying that it is ma sam Gyumed. It cannot be described, and it cannot be, the mind cannot grasp it. Samdumeva, same thing as this term here, that it's inconceivable. And when it's referring to Prajnaparamita, it's referring in particular to the object Prajnaparamita, which is emptiness itself. And it's saying that that object, the ultimate nature of things, cannot be correctly perceived as it actually is by a dualistic mind. However, that's not to say that a dualistic mind cannot realize emptiness. When we use correct reason to establish the meaning of emptiness, and we gain a correct conceptual understanding of emptiness, that's also a different meaning of a concept. That mind, we do want to say, realizes emptiness. It is an inferential knowledge about emptiness. And it is a correct understanding of emptiness. However, it is not, because of the nature of conceptual thought, then it does not perceive its object directly, rather it perceives it by way of mental images. And therefore, that mind is a dualistic mind. And to that mind, emptiness appears to be something distinct from the mind that's perceiving it. So in that sense, even though it's a correct realization of emptiness, it's not realizing emptiness as it is, as it truly is. Chitta Shindu means, yathavat means directly in its actual form. Then only that meditative state has that capacity. However, that's not to diminish its importance, that correct conceptual understanding is essential. Without it, we cannot eventually gain the direct realization of emptiness. So we need to understand that distinction as well.
Tene Rashinanda said the Rashi Jampa Karashasun, Jampa to Basha. The Ran Benesim, assembly, Ram Putane, Gajatin, Tabarba, Jampa Meverba,
Sem Quran.
Sem Kona, Sidan Shirkan Ditine, Ram Putane, and you more to Berba. To be yesterday, I think it must have to Karashas and the Shaka. She will take my dear Shani, dear Lucabe, child till it came together. Tilla, she does here. The logo with Timas Yatita, yet I know here, but logo Timatilla, Leggy, Lenny, but the logo with Timas Yati. Then you go to logo Timas Yati, could you get on a gate? You can match up never cherry. Could Lubu attend to the Yamara. No, teacher Lubu Namda Chati. Rashinanda said, Lubu Namda Chani and go Tentilla. Rashinanda said, the Rashin Chivas at the Karisha Listener. The Indonesia. Dita Jawakina, Rashinanda said, that the Tenduka came into the skin, not a Tenduka. No. Tara, Lubu Nanda said the Lubu with Timatilla, Lenisha. Only the said a chatilla. No Lubu Nanda with Charles will go Pentilla.
So, another important distinction relates to the term stains, Gyumed, or Sanskrit mala. So we say that the truth of cessation has an innate purity and it has an adventitious purity. So the word purity implies the absence of stain. So when we say the innate purity, and we say that that means the ultimate nature, the emptiness of the truth of cessation, so the purity of which that entity, the truth of cessation, is innately pure is the condition of being self-existent. So nothing, when it arises with that impurity. Nothing arises as a self-existent entity. So all things that exist, including in this case, the truth of cessation, are innately pure in that they lack that quality of being self-existent. Debye means to exist truly, to have some self-existent nature. Nothing has that stain. Nothing has that quality to taint it. So everything is pure in the sense that it is bereft of self-existence. Purity of truth of cessation, and that is the stain which it does not have, and never did have, and never will have. There is, however, an adventitious stain that also the truth of cessation lacks. When we talk about the adventitious stain, what is meant is karma, impure karma, and the mental afflictions. So those stains are adventitious, meaning that they occur when the conditions that enable them to occur are present. So if the conditions for the mental afflictions and karma to arise are present, then they will arise. And so in that sense, they are temporary or adventitious. Once those causes and conditions that enable them to arise are removed, then they no longer will arise. And so the truth of cessation also has a quality of purity that is to be free of those adventitious stains of karma and the mental afflictions.
Then Rashi Tima said the Mary did Yamaris. Gadget into Yamari, and gadget into Cape, Mangas, Shagir, gadget timber to the Yamari. Rashi Timothy, Yamariti, and should come jet that and she could make the theory. Rashing is in Mumbatia group them, Tibeton, Rashing
So further, that so-called innate stain is a fiction. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as self-existence. So self-existence is the object that needs to be refuted. It's a non-existence. It's a quality that does not exist, but we falsely believe exists. Nothing has ever possessed that stain. So everything has always been innately pure in that sense. We need to understand that as well. So gakcha, dendrup, that innate stain is the object to be refuted, which means to be self-existent or to be truly existent, and that is in fact a non-entity. It does not exist.
That in a meaning says to her, some meaning says,
No.
meaning said, Lenin means later, you never see. But the Lenin killing never see. When I sat and moved to into the go then to Lugunanda, go then to No. Lenin said and go to listen to Yama. Lenin said and go to Topson. I think the one to Sat and look also. Le Chiribachita, Chirimo Chiribachis evidence. Chiribasati, Lenny Chiris Tabaso. Sat and bring baby Banjal Cuban, and money. Next time you were than the run. Thus, such you were Sanjay Toyendo. Lenny Tanjay the Java, Kachumba Toyendo, Lenny got Java, or Timothy the Thunder, means Lenny possible. Go tentilla. I think I listen. It in a Satambune Chibapatu, Kuba Chetilla, catch Sakeva Chetilla, Lenny Chilis. Sakeva to me, charging the toilet. Lenny got pampered.
Then the second quality is then the absence of two, advaya. Sometimes advaya means not. It literally means absence of two. Sometimes it's translated as non-dual. And here doesn't mean non-dual in the sense of non-dual mind. The two things which are not present, the absence of the two is referring to the absence of these two adventitious stains, namely karma and the mental afflictions. So those two forms of stains are, when to say that they're not present in the truth of cessation, that's what the term means, or the absence of two. Then that also needs to be clarified, or a distinction needs to be made about it. When a practitioner achieves the first level of the transcendent path, achieves the seeing path, when that person becomes an Arya, then he or she achieves truth of cessation. And so that truth of cessation, we can say, is qualified by the absence of the two, karma and kleshas. But it doesn't mean, what we need to clarify is that it doesn't mean in an absolute sense that that person who has achieved the transcendent path has abandoned the mental afflictions and karma in their entirety, impure karma in their entirety. So you need to qualify it as saying chirikpa means some particular form of the two. And that qualifier is true all the way from the first level of the Arya Mahayana path up to the 8th level of Mahayana Arya path. Once the 8th level of the Mahayana path is achieved, then one becomes an Arhat. And an Arhat is, by definition, someone who has completely abandoned all the mental afflictions and impure karma. So that the person who possesses that form of the truth of cessation at the 8th level, then that person has completely abandoned the 2. But anywhere below that, anywhere above the first level of the transcendent path, up to the 8th level, that person, he or she, when they achieve each of those levels, they achieve various forms of the truth of cessation. Then each one of those levels, as one practices them, the corresponding antidote for the specific obstacles that are abandoned by that level of the path, then achieve specific forms of the truth of cessation. So there are specific forms of the mental afflictions and karma that are abandoned on each of those successive levels up to the 8th level, at which time then they're all fully abandoned.
That don't mention it. Ani Lenin 시대 그냥 가르쳐 주미 이지게 남도 길이네봐 주미 이지게 남도 뒤다 대신시어 대신 대신바 대지
네.
근데 내가 쳐서 차단로서도 무슨 싸워디 대지봐 내 상임이 또 시대인데
네. 대지
다디 대지 들어봐 다디 대지들이니까 일단 또 메시지 넘버 또 내스 주미 이지게 남도 길이네봐
동네 이직이 남동네.
동네세도
네.
주미 이지게
수신 이직이 또.
주미 남도 길이네봐스 위에다디 사담을 거수 덴지 친구로서부터 야마바 덴지 사담을 이것은 수비티야 그런 우리 덴지 먹어야봐
알레디
사담을 고대 투가 뒤에나
어디
그런 반절 주대 덴지 지 세바바 세상단다 남도 지메 바스
And the third quality,
동네세
then the third characteristic of the third characteristic of true cessation is dongme. Dongme means to be free of conceptualization. In this particular translation, it says non-discriminative. Then free of vikalpa, number topa. Then number topa here, in particular, means denzingi number topa. So the form of conceptual mind that grasps things to be self-existent, and that is denzin. Denzin means holding things to be truly existent. That mind is the essence of a subtle form of ignorance. Then that also can occur with dualistic mind. So here, in particular, it means the form of another qualifier that describes that kind of mind is that it is improper attention, improper manaskara. So manaskara is a way of engaging an object. It's a mental factor, manaskara, one of the basic forms of way the mind operates. Then manaskara can be proper or improper. So here, this is improper form of mental engagement or attention. Specifically, the improper form of mental engagement that grasps things as being self-existent. And that also is a kind of conceptualizing mind. Then that kind of mind also is not present in the truth of cessation. But we have to then qualify that type of belief in things as being self-existent also has a range of subtlety to it, but it has a coarser form. There are generally, it's distinguished in 9 different levels. So there's a coarse, middling, and subtle form. And each one of those also has 3 subdivisions. So there's a coarse of coarse, middling of coarse, subtle of coarse, and same 3 for middling, same 3 for subtle. And they are abandoned from the coarser to the subtle as you proceed along the stages of the path. So when we say that there's no such improper form of mental engagement that grasps things as being truly existent in the truth of cessation, then we need to be more specific and say at the level of the first bhumi, the first Mahayana Arya bhumi, then the most coarse form of that kind of grasping mind has been abandoned, but not the subtler forms. They still exist, at least in potential form. There's a difference also between the dormant state of those minds and the active state of those minds. So when you achieve the truth of cessation, you are eliminating the very seeds that allows those minds to become manifest. So, but those seeds have different degrees of subtlety. So again, when we say that that kind of conceptual mind that grasps things as self-existent is not present, we mean it is gradually, its grosser forms are then progressively being removed as you make progress.
아니 겐지 다 지리세디 겐지 생기 군다 지리
그래.
다 방기에 사담부 토인지
군다
겐지 군다 방기에 봐 아니야 겐지 지리 방기
사담부 토이
사담부네 다 사담부 인제는 다 샤브르바
그래.
사담부네 이파도 고랑 남바 샤브르바
맞습니다.
사담부 내려시다 겐지 군다 방에 자와치 그거가
So
이 인베인제 겐지 엔지 중중 시스템 구야가 지리 반구야가 그래서 남도치 사변대 제바판
So another distinction about these, what is absent in the truth of cessation, meaning these obstacles have been removed or are removed in their various forms on the different stages of the transcendent path. Then another distinction about those obstacles is that they have an innate form and they have a conceptualized form. I'm not sure, sankalpita. Then the first, when one achieves the transcendent path, then the form of the mental afflictions that is due to the mistaken understanding, that form of the mental afflictions, including the belief that things are real, are eliminated. So if you have a direct realization of ultimate reality, then you no longer are subject to wrong thinking that produces the mental affliction. However, there is a more subtle source of the mental affliction, which is the deeply ingrained then propensity to develop those mental afflictions. And that's the innate form of the mental afflictions. That's one that does not require improper thinking to manifest the mental afflictions. They just occur habitually. And they are more difficult to remove. Those are removed by deepening one's realization of reality. So then we say that this form of conceptual thought, as well as the mental afflictions, they all have an innate form and a form which is due to improper understanding. So initially, when you achieve the transcendent path, all forms of the mental afflictions including the belief that things are self-existent, the form of those obstacles that is due to wrong thinking, wrong understanding, those are swept away all at once. But all the innate forms then remain, and they have to slowly be removed. So therefore, the term jirikpa means as appropriate. So as appropriate to each level of the path, then the karma and the mental afflictions are not present. And the form of believing in things as real, whether it is the innate form or the form that arises due to mistaken thinking, then as appropriate when you progress along the path, those are slowly being eliminated. So there's a controversial verse in the text which comes later, which says that once a person achieves the Mahayana Arya status, they have abandoned aging, they abandoned sickness, they have abandoned death. Normally, one associates those terms with achieving Arhat status, abandoning samsara completely. But the unique point which is taught in this text is that any Mahayana Arya, once they achieve the transcendent path, they are no longer subject to sickness, old age, and death. And therefore we can say they're no longer subject to suffering. So if they are injured, they do not experience it as suffering. So most of us are familiar with the doctrine of dependent origination, and the doctrine of dependent origination has a forward order of progression and then a reverse order of elimination. And there are different distinctions about that doctrine that can be made. For instance, there's a way of understanding the doctrine of dependent origination that relates to being reborn in the lower realms. So there's karma and mental afflictions specifically, which bring rebirth in the lower realms. And there is corresponding elimination of karma and mental afflictions, which remove the possibility of being reborn in the lower realms. And then there is a further level of attainment where one no longer will be reborn in the desire realm. Even the higher, the more favorable forms of rebirth in the desire realm, a human being, for instance, or as a worldly god of the desire realm. And then there is the form of the 12 limbs of dependent origination that apply to all of samsara in its entirety. The three realms, all three realms. So when someone achieves the stream enterer status, in general sense, for instance, in the inanimate path, then that person no longer will be reborn in the lower realm at all. Then when one achieves the status of a non-returner, the portion of the mental afflictions that have been eliminated, the forms of truth of cessation that represent the elimination of the mental afflictions that bring rebirth into the desire realm, they are eliminated. And then when you achieve arhat status, then any mental affliction that would bring rebirth in any of the three realms is removed. Those can be interpreted in terms of the 12 limbs of dependent origination. So there's a way of describing that process that relates to rebirth in the lower realm. There's a way of describing that process that relates to rebirth in the desire realm, and further, one that relates to all three realms, as well as their corresponding elimination. So, specific to the verse, in this case, verse 10, the first three characteristics all relate to the truth of cessation. The first of those three, the inconceivability, specifically addresses the innate purity of the truth of cessation. And then the next two, the absence of two being the second one, and the third one, the absence of conceptualizing thought, those two relate to the purity that is the removal of the adventitious state. So there are a total of three qualities that relate to the truth of cessation. Then the next three are a purity, the term is a purity, then a, what does he say? He says manifestation. Vyakti means an appearance, something that becomes evident. And then he says hostility. I'm sure it means something that represents an antidote, the antidote to some obstacle. So, an element of knowledge which is hostile to an antidote, in that sense, hostile. Normally in Tibetan, it's referred to as nyembo. Nyembo means remedy or antidote rather than hostility. So anyway, purity, then a manifestness, and a quality of being a remedy or antidote. Those three terms relate to the truth of the path.
남제들이 단지들이 고dengi 제시해요. 다 남을 대신 남세들이 딩노 dKon이 무슨 뜻이 시디 다바세디 다야기 그래서는 지레 사빈치 네바 지만 네바죠. 다바세.
So when we talk about the truth of the path, we're talking about a form of transcendent awareness, and particularly a form of awareness that perceives emptiness directly. So when that state of direct awareness of emptiness is present in the mind, then that awareness has a purity to it. The purity refers to the fact that no form of obstacle in the form of seeds is present accompanying that mind. So it is pure in that sense.
다세와 세디 그래서는 dKon이 무슨 뜻이 시디 그래서는 나와서는 동반이 무슨 뜻이 있어?
So sewa in Tibetan, vyakti in Sanskrit, this translation says manifestation. Rinpoche's explanation is saying it really refers to the clarity of the mind, that it is seeing its object in a clear way, in a manifest way, namely emptiness.
그래서는 단지 이마티 랑고노티 지마디 매버를 치르와 제산티 다바세 랑고노티 지네 다바르치 모세버를 치르 다 수세버를 제반에서 세워스 단단데 공민수도 또 시티기 다 다음에 되는데 무수도 또 있어.
So the metaphor for the Dharma Ratna in the preceding verse 9 is the Dharma of the sun of the Dharma, the sun in the sky. So the sun is by nature has purity to it, and its light rays are such that they illuminate, that they make things evident. And so in this case, the second characteristic of the truth of the path is that it illuminates or makes clear one's understanding of reality.
차도 면수
차토 아니
차바스는 되잘 수고해봐. 시집지. 면집스는
멤버집 알아요.
멤버집스는 사람이 지고 시티 대신 사람이 지고 대신 그래서 그래.
So then the quality of that knowledge, which represents a remedy or an antidote, is that it overcomes or it eliminates in three kinds of obstacle. Driva means an obstruction. Then chaksok means the mental affliction. Chaksok driva, first level, is the obstruction of the mental afflictions, the rough mental afflictions. Tokpe driva, tokpa means a right.
차바다 이두 명은 로단이 결기 초대 넘버 2 당화제 몸에 말이봐 경벌 때 담지 님한테가 주시다.
맞아요.
이것이 차강원수.
So the three obstructions here are mainly the three poisons of desire, aversion or hatred, and ignorance. Then the sun of the Dharma eliminates the seeds of the mental afflictions that arise from perceiving things as attractive, and the aversion or hatred that has antipathy towards its object, and the ignorance which has a lack of clarity about the nature of its object. And in the ninth, no. So in the ninth verse, which describes the Dharma as resembling the sun, that's mainly referring to the truth of the path, knowledge, quality of knowledge that is pure knowledge, and is knowledge that illuminates, and it is knowledge which eliminates. It's mainly that those are mainly characteristics associated with the nature of the sun and the light that it casts off. The second group of three characteristics in the verse 10 are identifying those qualities. Then the explicit topic, the explicit form of the Dharma-ratna that is being described here is the Mahayana Dharma-ratna. However, the Hinayana form of the Dharma, the truth of the path and truth of cessation, are also subsumed within that and can also be interpreted as being included. So while the primary form of the Dharma-ratna and the primary form of the Sangha-ratna is, in the case of the Sangha, the irreversible, those irreversible, the Arya Bodhisattvas, then there are also forms of the that relate to the Shravaka vehicle, the vehicle of the listeners, and the vehicle of the solitary realizers or Prajika Buddhas. They have their own truth of path, they have their own truth of cessation. They both are recognized as perceiving emptiness directly, and with that knowledge, eliminating the mental afflictions in particular. And so when we speak of the Dharma Ratna, it does not exclude that.
而且呢，更是讲你查的话，第一次你见的就是，这个更是查巴的条啊，我点给的事情，但不送不的，更是查巴的条啊，我点给的下，或者起码送不的，刚给查巴的条啊，
这个问题，
我点给让点给的些。
So the second half of the verse is referring to the 6 characteristics that have just been described. So it says that which is the absence of desire. Viraga means freedom from desire or detachment. That which brings detachment from the obstacle. That which is detachment from the obstacles is referring to the truth of cessation. And that by which that detachment is achieved is referring to the truth of the path. And that is the Dharma, that is the Dharma Ratna, which has both characteristics. That is the state of detachment, meaning the abandonment, and it is the means of achieving that detachment, which is the truth of the path.
到第二次你见的确实，第二次的怎么西南呢？我点从那天把它从你怎么去发展，就在南边的我点你的吧。第二次的都是这个这边呢，第二次你见的确实的，怎么西南呢？ 남장 쪽에 때문에 가이샤우스는 고된다 남대니
So and then the last line says it has the characteristics of the 2 truths. So this is not talking about the relative truth and ultimate truth. It's talking about 2 of the 4 truths. And so the 4 noble truths are then sometimes described as 2 pairs of truths. Right? And the first pair of truths, the truth of suffering and the truth of origination, are called in Jampa. So there's the truths that relate to the process of affliction, and that's the first 2 truths. And then the second pair of truths are the truths that relate to the process of purification. Namjang chok ichur. Namjang chok demba. Means bringing about purification. And then nomon is the process of remaining afflicted. So the first 2 truths are relate to the samsaric process of affliction, cause and result. And then the latter 2 truths are what relate to the process of purification, the cause being the path, the result being the cessation. So then we say in Tibetan, nyomong. Nyomong means mental affliction. Then nyomong chok means that which pertains to not the mental afflictions, but the process of affliction being a process. But in Tibetan, the distinction between the noun mental affliction and the process of becoming afflicted are not distinguished. The word is nyomong. So when you say nyomong chok, then that means either one of the truths of suffering or origination. But the truth of suffering itself is not a mental affliction. The mental afflictions are included in the truth of origination. So, but we want to speak of them inclusively, and we have to say mchog is that which pertains to the afflictions, if you say. And suffering pertains to the afflictions in that they are its result. But when we speak of purification, then the past, the truth of the past and the truth of cessation are both a kind of nabajam, a kind of purity. It's kind of, in Tibetan, the distinction between the noun and the active process are not distinguished, per se. So linguistically, Tibetans will address that and make certain clarifications based on terminology.
That's true to the dish. Sumba can do condition some but some Tibet in the church, yes, Satan will come and then go into chairman of Sibatan. Any Bashi, it's Tarbatun, Lord, Gone. That's Sunday, the chairman of the chairman to the toast. And you can do Sumba can do conjuros, that under the children do the share. That did not the child and no right. Can you get not the child much at Pasha? Should you turn that? The structure of the text is, in the case of the three Ratnas in particular, the first verse that relates to each of the three Ratnas is this poetic then formulation of a verse of homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha.
and then the image, the symbolism that is represented in each of those verses then is unpacked in the verses that follow. And among the verses that follow, the one that immediately follows those verses identifies the particular characteristics. And then the successive verses, series of them, 3 or 4, then those make the connection between those characteristics and the terms that appear in the first poetic verse. So rather than go through that, identifying the connection between the verse and those characteristics, they have essentially been described already by Rinpoche, but each of those verses does so more specifically. And rather than take the time going through each one of them, then so we basically focused on the introductory verse and then identifying the characteristics that are to be presented in that verse. So, having said that, then we will go now to the third Ratna. So the one point that is addressed in commentaries that relates sort of how would you say it, kind of ancillary to the Dharma Ratna is the nature of how we should understand the ultimate cause of samsaric existence. The ultimate cause of samsaric existence, as it's being presented in this text, should be understood in terms of the terminology and the ideas that surround the nature of the kam, the word dhatu, which is referring to Buddha nature. Everybody seems to know Buddha nature. Some people take issue with the way I translated. Gotra is another word, the spiritual lineage, meaning that potential for enlightenment. That potential for enlightenment then can be characterized as then the mind which is stained in the sense that it is covered by adventitious stains. That mind's true nature is that seed. That is the very Buddha nature. That is the constituent element, which is one of the main focuses of this text. So, but it's being characterized in that particular way. The luminous emptiness, which is the purity of the mind, the innate purity of the mind, which nevertheless is covered by adventitious stains. Then not knowing that that impure mind's ultimate nature is emptiness, not knowing that, and mistakenly holding the mind to be self-existent, that is how we should understand the cause of samsara, what it is. Then when we replace that erring mind with the mind that perceives directly that the impure mind, the mind is not yet enlightened. Nevertheless, its ultimate nature is that luminous quality of the mind's emptiness. And that is what the ability to free ourselves from samsara.
今天谈的也把谈这个到让谈自己的，呢谈自己的让自己的，让自己的习的态度的谈自己的，第一上谈自己的不的都你都得习的，让自己的不的像这个声音吧，第一的不的，但是他是从这之间我们之间不要的。 시다 내가 탐지 가가지 라진지 단진이 들이 라진지 들이 라진지 시다지 단지 들이가 이 예산이
So
그와 유지 또 되게 좋도가
so that point needs to be grasped. Then something that relates to that point, another point that is particularly salient to the Lojong tradition is that in Lojong, the main obstacle is self-cherishing mind. And in Lojong tradition, the self-cherishing mind is not separated from the mind that mistakenly holds things to be self-existent. Then that self-cherishing mind, the mind which places oneself above others, its ultimate root comes from believing things to be self-existent. So they are, one is wisdom, is the antidote to the belief that things are self-existent. Then the mind which overcomes the selfishness that arises from that belief in things, that false belief in things are real. And the antidote to that is compassion. So those two things need to be combined. And then that is really the heart of Mahayana practice. So there is a connection. When this is the relative truth form of bodhicitta is aspiring to enlightenment for the sake of others. Then the wisdom side of that also is a kind of bodhicitta. Then the ultimate bodhicitta. Then those two are linked in a way. The antidotes need to be practiced together, and what they are remedies for, then they are also connected, those obstacles.
第一上该说的东北人的那个东北人的特征节也挺皮不一样的，而且呢，这个东北人的特征节的东西讲谁都是说不接的，就是在几十年的。因为东北人的那美性这个那个节呢，他们个不不一样，来几这个一个俺们嘛我是，你马街这一个的生活。
他们个好的。
东北人那个节呢。
上面的吧嘛的。
上面的这个一个俺们嘛我是的，来的就这个嘛的，这个我不是这个一个俺们的嘛我是这么那个谁不也是的？我第一声，东北人这上几个月这个偏心不是不送不应该，因为俺这个俺里呢东北人的个蛮不灵个呀，七八千个东北人个，南京几个东北人个，阶级中阶级的东北人三个几个大家谁要去？这个人性那个了就， some dead, some dead, but that's usually. Russian ever do touch with the machine. Russian met some jet. Should don't get Russian never in some Jenny. Deep budget usually. Never Jenny. Russian member never Jenny. What is any? This is Jay catching me and you caress around the name and delivery, your delivery, to make it already, harmony. I need it easy to be able. But this is an company said Chebekajashaya. Chebekajashaya, Maximus, energy, some time. Rushing is in the container. Rushing to a city. Nancy has a country cabinet. Madame the candidate was teacher catching him.
So, in connection with this, one can say it is crucially important to seek and to pursue a course of study and a course of reflection, Turba and Samba. Turba literally means to listen, but listen means to learn, to learn through language and through hearing instruction. Then that's one level of understanding. Then when you have a full then understanding of the teaching about emptiness, then you have to reflect on it to refine that understanding and make it and clear and correct. So both of those activities are extremely important. So there is a verse from Aryadeva's 400 verses on right view, the doctrine of emptiness, which says that even to entertain doubt, meaning to consider the possibility that things might be empty, then that thought alone has the ability to shred samsara, means to destroy, to tear it to pieces. Then even that is a very auspicious state of mind. Then beyond that, there's a word in Tibet called merva. Merva actually has several senses to it. One is a kind of general sense of merva is to be favorably disposed towards emptiness, to aspire to it, to think of it with a sense of almost admiration. So that's much stronger than doubt. You know, to be someone who values understanding emptiness and therefore is inclined to pursue it. But there's a more precise sense of the word merva, which is one might refer to it as devotion. And it's a form of devotion in the sense that it incorporates a sense of faith, but it's faith which is supported by some kind of certainty of understanding. So it means it's not direct realization, but there's a correct an intellectual understanding, a correct inferential understanding. And that's very powerful. So there's a sutra passage in which the Buddha says that the person who has the correct form of devotion towards emptiness, then it means that person does not have direct realization of emptiness at all, but has a sense of conviction and faith towards that understanding. That person, then for that person, even the 5 so-called immediate sins, which are the immediate, most grave kinds of misdeeds, killing your mother, your father, causing schism and samsara, injuring the Buddha. Those 5 deeds will not be an obstacle. Well, that means even if one has committed them in the past, this wisdom has the ability to overcome whatever negative influence those past misdeeds might pose for you. So that knowledge, that kind of devotional understanding is extremely powerful. Not only that, then in Tantra practice, then an understanding of emptiness is constantly being invoked, whether you are blessing offerings, whether you are practicing the three kinds of, the three main elements of generation stage practice. One has to constantly bring to mind a sense of the meaning of emptiness. So then obviously that's an important element of practice, and so we must have some level of understanding of emptiness, and we should value that, even if it comes to just having a sense of what the phrase lacking self-existence, to just have some appreciation of what that means and bringing it to mind. And those are, they have the effect of sort of reinforcing one's positive attitude towards it. In Tibetan words, bhakja. Bhakja means planting favorable impressions in the mind, which are have a very salutary effect on you spiritually. So this is something to highly regard, to value, and not to diminish its importance. Beyond that, then, according to one's abilities and one's opportunity, then one should further try to develop a tachoba means then a clear and unerring understanding of emptiness. And that is really what we should seek to attain. And as part of that, then we have to identify what is the nature of the mind that wrongly believes things to be self-existent. What is the quality of self-existence? To say that self-existence is being refuted, what is it? What is the nature of that fictitious self-existence? How to understand what that means as being the object to be refuted? We have to. That's an important element of gaining right understanding. So all of these things should be. One should appreciate them, have a sense of what they represent, and try to deepen one's understanding.
That's it.
So that was meant to kind of make a final point about the nature of Dharma, Dharma Ratna. And so before we get into the Sangha Ratna, and with the remaining time, it gives us the opportunity to raise any questions.
Yeah, that should be really
So specifically try to address the topic of the Dharma Ratna. We want to use the microphone.
Rinpoche had made this comment that the ultimate root of self-cherishing mind comes from believing that things are self-existent. Can you please elaborate on that?
点进的设不约了。
第一是之类的，点击的但哪的去，哪的那他在咱们应该的马些的这些，可能我们去有个经常有的，那是去清理这个，因为大年的差距吧，大年的新年的差距吧，是这样吧，因为然经济的。他用过有的，其他然经济上，但经济的，但经济的，然经济没的这事情呢，当不，就然经济上，但经济的的开发样那里，然出证呢，快的时间不然出证呢，然经济压力，经济压力，你的。因为他起码都这个看看样的吧，这样的开的是呢，你家住是能注意的，咱们让经济的，你就搞这个，因为啥结吧，出面就咱们让经济的，没被这个些的，啥结吧都是。他整个面积没被几个面积的几个的解起来，还是让经济的修的电机啊的，啥给了投资呢？让经济的买入的，因为样电机压力，电机的压力，所以说你可西电的电子，可卡个来许多。然经济的多出的这些电机的都是多么多啊，可西电的钱的多啊，但不基本上都难就感觉难就住在今年，然住在那然就去了，然经济压力、经济压力，你也得经济这个让经济这个是那些嘛这样的之类的，因为样可起码都就这个几个影响。西电的这些，他这对俺的人那一个咱们是现在去，在这个就咱们你就有个技能的那些，那就那些在这个是你就没得看，可是呢，有些错咱们点他都会他到咱们去学的也没学去，在这个去就哪里？马达马街的真的有了吧？我的印象，俺们那有些什么大时间里会面对个经历啊，第一就是俺自己修清明的了，第一就是让经济的就修清的军会啊，让经济定位啊，
Thank you for that question. Personal. That was such a beautiful explanation that you should identify that answer, and you should have somebody translate Rinpoche's words, not my words. Okay? I'm going to just give the gist of what you said as much as I can remember. You started out by saying that the sense of self that we have to think of ourselves as in our imperfect state, being such that our sense of self, as we tend to experience it, is such that we do not recognize that our sense of self is something we create, that our mind creates, is such that we think that there's some objective reality that constitutes our selfhood, and we're somehow seeing that or experiencing that and recognizing that. So that's our samsaric nature, and then that, from that, then the Buddhist concept of the mistaken view of the self is not only believing that there is a real self, but then identifying the things that that sense of self are its possessions, belong to it, whether it's your body, whether it's your clothing, whether it's your physical things, and then these are mine. And so in that sense, then all the forms of attachment and other mental afflictions then flow from that. So we understand that as being generally a samsara process. From the point of view of Mahayana, when we gain a sense of self in that flawed way, the sense of selfishness that we tend to have is not really distinct from that. They don't really occur in a distinct way. They're sort of tied up in the very sense of self that we have. Is not only is there this real self that we exist, but we think that that's the most important thing, and so therefore it matters more than other things. So that, in that sense, our flawed sense of self incorporates or includes a sense of selfishness, of putting ourselves first. However, in terms of abandoning the mistaken sense of self, you can distinguish those two, right? You can abandon the mistaken sense of self without abandoning your sense of your own personal being as mattering more than everyone else's. So you can pursue selflessness, and this notion of selflessness, without getting at the root of why we exclude others from our concerns, conceptually, in terms of our spiritual development. Then it went and made some really very subtle kind of distinctions. From the point of view of the seeds of where those manifest states of mind come from versus the manifest states, that they're different. So there's a term which Rinpoche started to bring up that he again addressed in your answer, which is normally we think of obstacles, right? The dribas. Driba means the avarana, means the things to be removed. Mental afflictions are one class of obstacles. Then there's the subtle obstacle to omniscience, right? So normally we think of those two. There are other different ways of describing obstacles, but there's a third one that he mentioned here, and that is the obstacle of falling prey to the lesser path. Membedripa. Membedripa means to be vulnerable to the tendency to give up the Mahayana path and fall into the Hinayana path and just seek your own liberation. That's Membedripa. Memba means the lesser, the obstacle of being vulnerable to pursuing the lesser path. Then he pointed out that that tendency, the seeds of that, and so that's the third one, that Membedripa, that relates to self-cherishing, right? So Menbe Driba is kind of a technical way of talking about self-cherishing. And that self-cherishing, it has a seed, it has a potential from which it manifests itself. That's the Menbe Driba, is actually the potentiality to manifest that. When he pointed out, he said, that's not eliminated. The potentiality of self-cherishing mind is not eliminated until you reach the 8th group. You may not manifest self-cherishing mind, but if you, another way, if you develop bodhicitta, right? If you develop genuine relative truth bodhicitta, the genuine aspiration to seek enlightenment, that mind, it doesn't uproot the seeds of self-cherishing mind, but it suppresses it, right? You cannot have self-cherishing mind and bodhicitta simultaneously. So that's an important distinction there. So in order to overcome it in terms of your spiritual development, you need to develop bodhicitta, and that's what Lojong is all about. But that relative truth mind, relative truth form bodhicitta, is a temporary antidote to self-cherishing. The seed of that tendency of selfishness is something that is in the seeds of the mental afflictions themselves, which ultimately come from believing in things to be self-existent. So conceptually, in terms of the path, those two things can be thought of distinctly, but they are very intimately related. That's the best I could do. But I urge you to find the tape, forget what I said, and translate what Rinpoche said, word for word. Really.
So is this specific obstacle to be eliminated the reason that bodhisattvas are said to be reversible up to the 8th ground?
어쨌든 이 면집이 아니 그래서 취미 도파 이 그래서 여체 딜 때는 쓰기가 왜 쓰기가 이 면집이 배방받을 때는 취미 도파 쓰기가 왜 뭐야?
메도 이시를 공부, 기타는 메도 이시를 공부하는 줄 알았는데 재미도 없어. 메도 이시라.
메도 이시.
메도 이시를 공부하는 줄 알았어.
갖고 문제지.
아예 서바들 서바충 서바빈 서바천도
그래. 이 조언을 뭐?
저는 아니도 서바충이 조랑빈에 됐어.
그래.
조나 서바도 메르바.
그래.
징티 돈 아니 네거스투리아.
딜레카스
메도 이시를 공부하는 줄 메도 이시는 공부하는 줄
미토 페이시. 미토 예시라 원규로. 공방 원규.
사케는 또.
미토 예시라 미토 예시 공방라 원규로 사케는 또.
메도
예시 공방라
메도 이시라 공방 원규.
미토 예시라 공방 원규 사케는 또. Okay, so that's a phrase. Okay, so midope yeshe means not conceptualizing transcendent awareness. That means perceives emptiness directly. Mido yeshe la gomba. Gomba means then to be. Gomba means then kind of accustomed, but in the sense of proficient.
That means the 게 그거 좀 보이네.
It means
사금바 면제도 진진 건도 좋아요.
So gomba means then to be practiced, past tense, meaning then expert. One guru means to have complete control of that proficiency. Then saying that quality is not attained until you reach the 8th guru. So the significance of that phrase is that until that mastery is achieved, then the seeds of Denzin have the possibility of arising. Nevertheless, there's another phrase called Sarvatoa. Sarva is the word which normally translated as patience. But this is not patience as in the sense of not becoming angry. This is maybe forbearance, which is more, how should you say, it is more a cognitive quality that what you are forbearing is the nature of reality, which is so powerful that normally we are not able to align ourselves with it. But when your understanding of that becomes stronger, then you kind of accept it. So it's a forbearance in that sense. And it has very deep meaning. So at the level of the path of preparation, one of the 4 levels is called forbearance. It's the third, right? So there's heat, and there's summit, then forbearance, and then supreme. That forbearance means your emptiness is strong enough that it kind of overwhelms you, and that you accept it with relish, and that has a transformative quality to it. So that's one kind of So this is forbearance really means not having any apprehension about emptiness. So it's a forbearance in that sense. And so there's a lesser form at the path of preparation. There's a middling form that's gained when you achieve the path of seeing. And then there's this great form, which is what was being described at the eighth. So that highest level was the one that was being identified as the way to overcome this obstacle that makes you vulnerable to selfishness, the possibility of falling into selfishness. So now at the end of the morning session, Rinpoche is suggesting that rather than resuming at 2, we better to resume at 1:30. There seems to be enough time for people to go out and take a break, get some bite to eat. To resume at 1:30, then we could I think what he said was we could still have the full afternoon session, but end earlier in the day. That might be preferable. So I suggest that 1:30. Go on.
Ratnagotravibhāga.